I'm Alex Michelson. This week on The Issue is a precarious week for the Newsom and Biden administrations.
We will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay.
President Biden responds to horrific suicide attacks in Afghanistan, the desperate effort to get Americans out of that country. And due to Afghanistan, Vice President Harris cancels her planned trip to California to campaign for the governor, as the recall looks increasingly like a real possibility. We'll debate it all with our panel. Ethan Bearman on the left, Tomi Lahren on the right. A special edition of The Issue Is starts right now.
Broadcasting across California, California's only statewide political show. You're watching The Issue Is.
And welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Alex Michelson. We were supposed to be broadcasting from the Bay Area this week with Vice President Harris. But events on the ground half a world away impacting Golden State politics in a big way. A pair of suicide attacks leading to the deadliest day for U.S. troops in years. There is a furious effort underway right now to get as many Americans out of that country as possible before another potential attack. Let's talk about that and more with our panel. On the left is Ethan Bearman. He's a progressive attorney who is also a veteran of talk radio, podcasts, and a whole lot of debates on the Fox News channel. So is Tomi Lahren. Her first and final thoughts can be seen every day on Fox Nation, and her book is titled Never Play Dead. Ethan, Tomi, welcome back to The Issue Is.
Great to be here with you, Alex.
Great to be with you from afar. Of course, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, but don't worry, I am still plenty fired up about California politics and follow them very closely.
All right, well, let's start, though, with your reaction to what's happening away from America in Afghanistan. Tomi, your reaction to that situation.
I think it's very simply put an unmitigated disaster. This is what happens when you have a commander-in-chief who is asleep at the wheel. This is what happens when you have a Democrat Party that is more consumed with climate change and wokeness and defunding the police than protecting and defending Americans wherever they may be. I don't think anybody would argue that we shouldn't withdraw from Afghanistan. It's the way that it was done. It was how poorly it was planned. It's the lack of information and answers we've been given from this administration that I think is so infuriating. It's an outrage. It is inexcusable. And I'd like to see anybody try to say otherwise because it's quite obviously a disaster.
Ethan,
Well, I'll say otherwise. Look, we have two sets of issues that happened here. First was the previous president actually is the one who released negotiated to release 5,000 Taliban prisoners, including the new leader of the Taliban in Afghanistan. And he's the one who negotiated a full withdrawal of U.S. troops by May the 1st, of which Joe Biden actually honored that negotiation that happened under the former president. Further, the second big point that I think isn't talked about enough was the prior administration failed to work with the incoming Biden administration for a smooth transition. Look, there's no clear, clean, easy way to withdraw from a messy war, which we should have never been in.
Tomi, does the former president bear any responsibility here?
Well, I can tell you this, if Donald Trump were still in charge, the desert would be quaking right now. Now, talking about negotiating with the Taliban, talking about trying to broker some kind of a peace deal, that's an aside. I think we all know that President Trump, as commander-in-chief, would not leave Americans stranded in Afghanistan with no plan to evacuate them, and then would not have U.S. officials share the names of Americans and Afghan allies with the Taliban to help them evacuate. But to go back on Ethan's point, the prior administration tried time and time again to talk to the Biden administration and the incoming Biden administration about ways to protect and defend our country, both at our southern border and abroad. Those were largely ignored. Those conversations were largely ignored. And you can see because President Biden undid almost everything that President Trump did to protect and defend this nation, starting with our southern border.
So he didn't communicate, Tomi. He didn't communicate. Actually, they specifically refused to share the information with the Biden administration. Furthermore, you're ignoring, when you talk about leaving Americans behind, let's talk about Otto Warmbier in North Korea. That was under Donald Trump's watch. Let's talk about the Kurds in Syria, which he abandoned for their slaughter at the hands of the dictator Bashar al-Assad.
So to now place this on Donald Trump's shoulders and say it was his fault is just whataboutisms. Let's talk about the situation on the ground. And I would like to ask you, if I may, Alex, I would would like to ask Ethan if he thinks that this president has done a satisfactory job of dealing with Afghanistan and answering questions about the dealing of Afghanistan.
I do, and he's gotten almost 100,000 people removed from Kabul, which nobody thought was possible in this time frame. He still has until August 31st. Furthermore, the U.S. government actually put out a warning before those 13 American soldiers were killed by ISIS terrorists. And remember, that's the ISIS that Donald Trump went on TV and declared defeated, which clearly was not the case. There are many of us on the left who've been calling for us to get out of those foreign wars since we actually entered them under another Republican president, George Bush.
Let's talk more about the recall election right now, which all recent polls show is a toss-up. If you're a registered voter in California, you should have your ballot right now. Of course, there are twice as many Democrats in the state, so the governor's main goal right now is to try to turn those Democrats out. The Bay Area rally with Vice President Harris canceled this week due to the situation in Afghanistan. It's not clear if it's ever going to be rescheduled or if President Biden will end up coming to California to campaign for the governor. The governor was hoping that they would help him. Let's talk more broadly about the recall question. We know that question 1 on the ballot, should Governor Newsom be recalled? Tomi, I know you have strong thoughts on this. Why should he be?
Oh, I think it's obvious. Look at the failed state of California. And I know what Ethan's probably going to say. He's going to tout that it's the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. All great things. It is home to great academic institutions. It's home to Hollywood. It's home to Silicon Valley. All wonderful things. It is a great state. It has abundant resources and beauty. It has the two of you there, which make it even more beautiful. So why then does it have the highest income inequality when you account for cost of living? Why do you have gas prices through the roof? Why do you have a homeless crisis that this governor has said to have addressed? But if anybody has taken a trip to Santa Monica, Venice, or San Francisco, they know that not to be the case. And also, when you look at the numbers and you compare places like California and New York to other states that chose freedom, that chose prosperity, both economically and freedom of choice when it comes to health and wellness, when you look at the COVID numbers, there is little, if any, difference in the way that that governor handled your state.
Yeah, this was a fever dream of the right that was paid for by the RNC and other Trump supporters as a court upheld to be stated in the mailings. That's who's behind this. It's hatred for any Democrat. It's very simple. Governor Gavin Newsom has done an amazing job leading this state through a horrific pandemic that has killed over 600,000 Americans. Let's not lose sight of that. Over 600,000 Americans. He's the one who took the lead, unlike places like Florida and Texas, where they're now having record numbers of deaths and overloaded hospitals where regular people are being turned away and dying as a result. 1,000 people a week are dying of COVID in places like Florida right now.
We know, though, Ethan, that the talking point is that it's a Republican recall, but there are Democrats that are supporting this. There are Democrats that signed that petition, and there are Democrats that are frustrated by some of the closures that we saw in the state, some things like EDD reform that has not happened, other places. I mean, there is Democratic frustration, no?
Oh, there's no question.
Or at least apathy.
There's absolutely no question about that. I mean, I'm the first one who will speak up about things like right here in Los Angeles, we had a supervisor who, after voting to close outdoor dining, went and ate at a restaurant. That is terrible. We need to do better, but that doesn't mean you get rid of the person who is leading that charge and doing it from a place of caring for Californians.
You mentioned you had folks there in LA that were dining out. You also had Governor Gavin Newsom dining out at the French Laundry. I think that really was the tipping point when he told everybody not to gather, to stay home. And he was there unmasked with his cronies at the French Laundry. That was a big point. This is Californians who watched the way that their tyrant, hypocrite leader led during COVID. And they said, enough of this. And they sent a message.
Well, we'll see if indeed they do send a message in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be interesting to see. More with the panel after a quick break. First, though, more music. This is Green Day's When I Come Around. What is it going to take for vaccine skeptics to come around? Mandates at the center of the recall election. We're debating all that next.
They are both promoting exact same position, walking off a COVID cliff and following the Ron DeSantis and the Texas model. So I would suggest they're much more similar than they appear.
That was Governor Newsom on The Issue Is last week with me, making his pitch for vaccine and mask mandates. All the Republicans running to replace him and the top Democrat, Kevin Paffrath, all say they want to get rid of those vaccine and mask mandates as governor. Let's dig into this with Tomi Lahren of Fox Nation, progressive attorney Ethan Bearman. Tomi, governor says that these mandates are saving lives. Why is he wrong?
Well, he's absolutely wrong. And anytime you take away personal freedom and choice, that is wrong on a number of levels. And I've often cautioned people, once you start giving your rights away, you likely won't get them back. And that has been the story of California, the first state to lock down, one of the last states to reopen, now following the New York model of mask mandates and vaccine mandates. Listen. A person's health decision, whether they choose to be vaccinated or not be vaccinated, is between them and their doctor. It is not up to your tyrant governor to decide. And the fact that he is making the unvaccinated feel as though they are lepers and degenerates, that they can't go in and eat a cheeseburger or go in and get a steak like he has done at the French Laundry without a vaccine card, is utterly ridiculous, especially for somebody who is against voter ID laws. Make it make sense, Ethan.
Well, he has not put out a vaccine mandate to go to restaurants. I mean, the governor hasn't done that.
That is the discussion, which is the New York model, which is that you'd have to show vaccine verification to essentially be able to live normal life. That's the discussion. I'm sure if he wasn't so terrified by this upcoming recall, that would have already been implemented. But we know that he is very scared of putting down any more tyranny, because that is what got him in this mess in the first place.
Although San Francisco is basically doing what you're suggesting. The local officials there chose to do that. Ethan, your comments.
Yeah, I mean, so George Washington, our founding fathers, they were tyrannical, horrible human beings that required people to get vaccines. They passed in 1796 an act relative to quarantine, authorizing federal officers to go and enforce local and state quarantine and public health laws. This is the founding of our country has recognized that during pandemics and major outbreaks, the public health is greater than your concept of freedom and liberty. Your freedom is there if you want to go live in a cabin in the woods like Ted Kaczynski and not participate in society. We don't live alone in little separate colonies anymore. And even when we did, our founding fathers said, you're going to have to get a vaccine. The Sixth Circuit just the other day said, again, a mandatory mask mandate doesn't violate any of those liberties that Tomi was just talking about.
Tomi, what do you say to his point that George Washington was inoculating against smallpox? I mean, that this does have a very long history in America.
That was a very nice infomercial against freedom that Ethan just gave us there. Appreciated bringing up George Washington. You know that Democrats love the Constitution when they can cherry pick in which way that they apply it in our founders and our founding fathers. Normally, they're wanting to destroy statues, but that's another point. Listen, also, you have to make this make sense to me. If vaccines are so effective, why do you want a mask mandate? So if you want people to get their vaccine, making them wear a face diaper is a great way to make sure that they don't do that. You've taken away all the incentives for people to actually go and get that vaccine. Another thing I will say is this. It is a personal choice. And considering all the lawlessness that goes on a daily basis in California, the fact that you are treating the unvaccinated like they are indeed the bandits and the problems with society is very laughable to me. But I'll also say this. We also do not know the true side effects of the vaccine. We've got one vaccine that has been FDA approved. The other two have not. So it is still largely an experimental vaccine. And I love folks that try to compare this to measles, mumps, rubella that have been time tested and true. We've got a Pfizer FDA approved vaccine, which the studies have still not been completed, by the way.
So
but
Tomi, are you aware that
approved.
the University of Wisconsin during the AIDS epidemic, the University of Wisconsin in the early 1990s is who started these mRNA vaccines. They're not new. The MERS and SARS vaccine is the same exact technology. It's not experimental. As a matter of fact, this vaccine now, with over 4 billion, closing in on 5 billion doses administered, is the most widely used vaccine now in the world. It's not experimental. There's next to nothing experimental. And if you bother reading the ingredient list, unlike the MMR vaccine, of which some people had legitimate concerns about heavy metals, for example, like mercury or aluminum, this has none of those dirty ingredients. This is such a simple and clean vaccine. As a matter of fact, that might be one of the things that's causing us to need a third shot as a booster, which, by the way, I'm ready to get one.
Oh, I'm sure that you'll get as many boosters as they offer, Ethan. And that's up to you. That's your personal decision. If you want to wear 1 mask, 2 masks, 3 masks, shoot up that vaccine as many times.
Are you a nudist too, though? You're complaining about masks. You called it a face diaper. So this is the argument. It's an article of clothing that is 70 to 89%, according to the preponderance of scientific literature, 70 to 89% effective at transmitting respiratory illnesses like SARS-CoV-2. And if you don't want to wear an article of clothing that's for the public health, right? No shoes, no shirt, no service is meaningless. Let's be nude. Why wash our hands? Nudity is our next thing, because that's what you're talking about. It's an article of clothing.
These false equivalencies are so ridiculous. The fact that your Lord Fauci went from don't mask to now you can unmask, now you need to mask again. It's these arbitrary restrictions.
It's not arbitrary. There weren't enough masks for medical professionals.
But Tommy, is it possible though that the science has changed? I mean, just like everything's evolving, the Delta variant is more transmissible, and it's changed the situation on the ground. And also, the vaccines do become less effective over time. That's the need for the booster shot. I mean, isn't that kind of following the science?
Alex, I'll tell you this, the science seems to change on a weekly basis. I think we all know that. It's changed time and time again. The CDC guidance has changed time and time again.
But isn't that the scientific process? When you learn more, you try to put the information out there?
I would like to see the scientific process play out on the vaccines and any possible side effects. Also, we still don't know the side effects of masking kids for 7 or 8 hours a day. We're still awaiting results on that. And if everybody wore a mask and changed their mask every time they touch their face, maybe you would have an argument for your face diapers. But if you, as well as I know, that people are touching their masks, they're essentially wearing the germs strapped across their face for hours on end. Can you and your governor and your Democratic comrades, can you really be serious about trying to talk about the pandemic and really try to talk about COVID when you're allowing 1 million plus illegal immigrants into our country, unvetted, untested, unvaccinated? Can you really be serious about trying to contain this pandemic when you're so for this open border that we currently have?
Absolutely. There's no such thing as an open border. That's a red herring. Secondly, the data shows that the people who are coming into our country actually have a lower COVID infection rate than actual American citizens. So that is a lovely red herring that the right likes to use, and it's not based on fact.
So, okay, we're taking us to a different place, and there could be an argument about whether we should have more testing or more vaccines at the border as well. That's a whole nother thing. Tommy, I mean, you don't have to answer this question, but did you get vaccinated, and do you have any plans to get vaccinated?
I'll proudly say no, and here's my reasoning for it. I'm a 29-year-old healthy individual. I take care of my health. I go to the gym. I run. I'm not scared of COVID. I haven't been scared of COVID. I haven't gotten COVID. It's my personal decision not to be vaccinated. I choose not to. I'm not here to tell anybody to get it or not to get it. That is not my place. That is your personal decision, and I hope that everybody makes it for themselves in consultation with their doctor and others with whom they trust.
All right. Well, Ethan, we know that you have, and you're looking forward to that booster shot. And last question, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, Tommy, is life more fun as a blonde?
Life is fun when you're in a free red state, and I hope that for Californians. And folks, you are so close in California. You are almost past that finish line of getting rid of Gavin Newsom. If you've seen what Democrats have done to our country, you've seen what Democrats have done to California, it's time to make a change.
All right, we're going to leave it there, and that seems like the perfect way to leave it with you, Tomi Lahren, Ethan Bearman. Great to see you both. Thank you so much for a spirited discussion, and we love having a free flow of ideas, and we welcome a respectful debate from both of you.
Thank you, Alex. Great to be here.
Before we go, a tribute to a rock legend. Charlie Watts, drummer for the Rolling Stones, passed away this week at 80 years old. For decades, Watts served as the heartbeat for the coolest band in rock history.
Just generally speaking, though, your overall view of women?
My general overall view of women, well, their IQs are 100, men's IQs are 100, they're equally smart. More women are in college than men. 90% of the people who are in prison are men, not women.
GOP frontrunner Larry Elder talked with Marla Tejas and me this week on Fox 11 Los Angeles. You can check out the full interview right now at youtube.com/Alex Michelson, or you can listen to it in podcast form. Just search for The Issue Is wherever you stream your podcast. Up next, a special tribute to our troops. We end this week with my thoughts on Afghanistan and music from Bruce Springsteen. We talk so much about what political leader is to blame for what's happening in Afghanistan, and that's an important debate. But it's also important to think about the people on the ground trying to live their lives. The Associated Press capturing these extraordinary images from the longest war in American history. It all started nearly 20 years ago after the worst terrorist attack on American soil. The initial goal? Bring to justice the perpetrators of that attack and ensure nothing like it ever happens again. Over the years, the mission hasn't always been quite so clear, and popular support for the U.S. presence dropped off so much that a Republican and a Democratic president both agreed to pull out of the country. Of course, the troops themselves don't choose their missions. They simply do the best they can wherever they're sent to protect themselves, their brothers and sisters, and when possible, to expand freedom. Most of them have done extraordinary work. They expanded education rights for Afghan women and girls, built infrastructure for vulnerable communities, and bonded with locals. But all of that has come with a big cost. These are images of the more than 2,300 American troops killed in Afghanistan. They are men and women who volunteered to serve, willing to give their lives to make our lives safer. Whatever you think of this war, or the many U.S. presidents behind it, I hope you can respect them and the sacrifice their families have made for all of us. We end this week by saying thank you to them all. I'm Alex Michelson. Thanks for watching The Issue Is.